Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. My name is SP Jimmy, and if you don't know where you are, this is a channel where we go through all of the primary and secondary power sets in City of Heroes 2019 to give you a better understanding so that you can go and use those powers more effectively. Make sure that you guys are subscribed if you want to stay up to date on the latest guides because there's going to be a lot of them coming out, and we're starting off today with staff fighting. Staff fighting allows you to strike at your foes in great sweeping arcs. It provides a good amount of control effects as well as some self buffs. By selecting the staff mastery power, you will gain access to techniques that further empower your staff fighting techniques and grant you useful augmentations that build up as you fight. What are those augmentations, you might ask? It is the form types here that you get from the staff mastery abilities. So before we can talk about the abilities, we have to talk about the different forms available. By purchasing staff mastery, you will gain access to the following powers: form of body, form of the mind, and form of the soul. For each of these toggle powers, it will allow the user to build up levels of perfection, which we will also see have a use in other abilities as well. It grants the user a stacking short duration of buff. Each buff is unique to the active form, and only one form can be active at a time. Perfection can be released by executing Eye of the Storm or Sky Splitter. So it says minus perfection on the list up there that we'll get to see, and that means it's spending your perfection that you built up with your other powers. When either of these attacks are empowered with perfection, they will have additional effects that are unique to each of them. So for the form of the body, it grants perfection of body levels. This power is obtained by purchasing staff mastery. All staff fighting attacks will build a level of perfection of body while this toggle is active. Each level will boost the user's damage output slightly, and once the user has built up 3 levels of perfection of body and they execute Eye of the Storm, the attack will reduce the target's damage resistance and will deal additional smashing damage. Executing Sky Splitter with 3 levels of perfection of body will deal additional smashing damage and grant the user a moderate resistance buff for a short time. And I'm a big fan of giving me damage, giving them less damage resistance. That sounds like a great form to use. Alternatively, you could use Form of the Mind, which grants perfection of the mind levels. This power will build a level of perfection of mind while the toggle is active. Each level will boost the user's recharge rate slightly. Once the user has built up 3 levels of perfection of mind and they execute Eye of the Storm, the attack will slow the target slightly and will deal additional psychic damage. Executing Sky Splitter with 3 levels of perfection of mind will deal additional psychic damage and grant the user a moderate 2-hit buff for a short time. Form of the Soul grants perfection of soul levels. This power is obtained by purchasing staff mastery. All staff fighting attacks will build a level of perfection of soul while this toggle is active. Each level will grant the user an endurance discount. Once the user has built up 3 levels of perfection of soul and they execute Eye of the Storm, the attack will take away the target's defense slightly, and they will deal additional energy damage to them. Executing Sky Splitter with 3 levels of perfection of soul will deal additional energy damage and grant the user a moderate regeneration and recovery buff for a short time. Now, depending on what your archetype is, you're going to gain the powers in a slightly different level. Of course, stalkers get their assassin staff at level 6. They get build up at level 8, but the other ones are pretty standard. Looks like everybody is getting guarded spin, so we'll just read through a couple of them. Brutes get Mercurial Blow, which is a melee light damage smashing with foe minus defense. Precise Strike, which is a melee moderate damage smashing with foe disorient. Guarded Spin that we'll get to read about, which is a moderate damage smash with self plus defense. Eye of the Storm, which is your player-based area of effect. You spin around, you knock up foes, and that consumes your perfection. Then when there's Staff Mastery at level 8, you get a standard taunt at level 12. You get a ranged Serpent Reach that I believe every class gets. They don't all get it at level 18, but they all get Serpent's Reach at some point. Some of them at 28. And then Sky Splitter at your last level there. Your level 32 or your tier 9 ability, melee extreme damage, smash, foe knockup, disorient minus fly, and it also consumes your perfection as well. Innocuous strikes you could get around the level 26 area depending on your class. It's a melee cone with high damage smash and a foe immobilize and minus speed effect as well. For a guarded spin, you spin your staff like a propeller in front of you, dealing light smashing damage to enemies in your frontal arc and deflecting any incoming attacks, thus boosting your melee and lethal damage briefly. While a form is active, this power will build one level of perfection, and it can take a defense buff, so you could put a Luck of the Gambler in there as well. For innocuous strikes, you repeatedly batter your foe's legs with a flurry of sweeps of your staff. This attack deals a moderate smashing damage to all foes within its cone. All affected targets will have their movement speed reduced with a chance of being immobilized briefly. While a form is active, this power builds one level of perfection, and we see an immobilized set category here, so we could put in a chance for a +2 magnitude hold if we wanted to. Serpent's Reach, you fully extend your staff and release a burst of energy to lash out at a distant target and deal high smashing damage with a good chance to knock your target down. And then you get one level of perfection while a form is active as well. And this has the knockback set category, which you could use sudden acceleration, knockback to knock down to keep them within your range. For Sky Splitter, you leap into the air and hammer your foe with an overhead bash from your staff. Sky Splitter deals extreme smashing damage and will knock the target into the air and will briefly disorient your target. While a form is active, this power builds one level of perfection if the user has 2 or less levels. If the user has 3 levels of perfection, it will consume them and gain some benefit. 3 levels of perfection of body will cause additional smashing damage and grant the user a bonus to damage resistance for a short time. 3 levels of perfection of mind will cause that additional psychic damage and boost the user's chance to hit for a short time, and 3 levels of perfection of soul will cause additional energy damage and increase the user's regeneration and recovery rate briefly. Critical hit damage isn't enhanced by levels of perfection. It takes stuns, knockback, and melee damage. And I think that was the last one. They have, what was the name of the other one? Sky Splitter. And oh, Eye of the Storm, because that also consumes your perfection. So I wanted to talk about that one. And then that's going to be the last one that we look at for today. Eye of the Storm, with a lightning fast series of spins of your staff, you strike at all nearby foes, dealing moderate damage with a chance of knocking foes down. While a form is active, this power will build one level of perfection if the user has 2 or less levels. If the user has 3 levels of perfection, it will consume them and gain some benefit. 3 levels of perfection of body will cause additional smashing damage and reduce damage resistance slightly for a short amount of time. 3 levels of perfection of mind will cause additional psionic damage and reduce attack and movement speed for a short time. 3 levels of perfection of soul will cause additional energy damage and reduce defense for a short time. Critical hit damage isn't enhanced by levels of perfection, and that takes knockdown, player based area of effect damage, and taunts if you are a brute or a tanker as well. And I want to know down in the comments, what do you guys think is a good power combination for staff mastery? I would love to make some builds, or sorry, for staff fighting mastery. Over to here, staff mastery is the power. Staff fighting. Let me know some good power combinations, and perhaps I will add them in a build in one of the future videos. And if you want to check out some of these builds, I know that I may have some over in my other videos towards the end or down in the comments, so please do go check those out. My name is SP Jimmy, and I will see you guys in a little bit.